Hello everyone and welcome back. This is Doc and Padama, and this time I am going to present to you the research paradigm, the statement of the problem, and the hypothesis for an experimental research. So if you are writing your study or your research paper and you are using or utilizing the research design, experimental research or quasi-experimental research, this particular parts of your research would be able to help you in formulating the following parts, specifically the research paradigm, the statement of the problem, and the hypothesis. So I hope you join me in this particular discussion of this part of your research, and I'll explain to you how these parts are relevant to one another. So before we continue, please subscribe to my YouTube channel at Docket Padama. Click that notification bell to alert you when a new video has been uploaded. So to continue, as you can see in your screen, I already have a template for the research paradigm for an experimental research. So, what are these particular parts, elements, and how are they related to the SOP? So, I'm going to explain and label the parts. You can also put this in your actual manuscript. So, the first one, under the statement of the problem, is the comparability test. So, we conduct comparability in order to make sure that the ability in terms of the domain that you're going to use, in this case the grade average of students, because as a teacher, specifically if I would like to test a teaching strategy, I would like to use this on two groups, specifically two classes that has the same level of grade average. So it is important, it is imperative that you set this particular criteria before you start your experimental research. So we call these groups control group and the experimental group. So again, the first one in our SOP is the comparability test. So if we're going to mark and label this, this would reflect under SOP 1, and this is what we call comparability. Okay, I'll just abbreviate the term. So this refers to comparability. Or let us make this smaller so we can actually put the term so that we will be guided properly during our discussion. This is going to be comparability under SOP number 1. Okay, so we have already established comparability in our paradigm, and that is also what is reflected in our SOP or statement of the problem. The next one is we compare the pre-test performance of the two groups, meaning the controlled group and the experimental group. So this will fall under this particular SOP. So we're going to label this as, this one is SOP2 and this is also SOP2. Okay, and then later on, so again, let's read the second statement of the problem. What is the pre-test performance of the two groups? So we're referring to the controlled group under that one. So that's the pre-test and the experimental group. So again, these two are reflected under the SOP. And then under SOP3, the significant difference between the pre-test performances of the two groups. Now we are going to compare. Is there significant difference between the pre-test of the controlled group and the pre-test of the experimental group? So this is what we now call, this will now be our SOP number 3, and this will now be labeled as the significant difference. Significant difference between the pre-test of the two groups. Again, to those who are listening right now in our discussion, all of these are already template prepared for you. What we are doing right now is presenting to you the relevance of the paradigm to the SOP so that you would be able to follow and discuss this with your panelists during your defense. So the flow of the research paradigm would start from the control group going down to the pretest, and on the other side also will be the experimental group going to their pretest instrument, and then the comparability will go two-way, the same with the significant difference. So these are the arrowheads that you're going to use for this particular diagram. Okay, the next one under SOP number 4. So if you're going to look at SOP number 4, what is the post-test performance of the two groups? So referring to post-test, these are the post-test. You're going to present the result of the post-test, and then after that, immediately you're going to compare if there is significant difference between the post-test of the controlled group and the experimental group. Okay, so again, I am going to present to you the flow of the diagram, continuing again from the pretest. You go down, and then under the control group, as you can see here, under the controlled group, after the pretest, the non-strategy group or the control group will use the non-strategy, meaning the conventional method of teaching, without the use of the strategy being introduced in your particular research. So after conducting the lesson without the use of the strategy, this is now the time wherein the post-test will be administered. So again, going down here, the same with the other side. From the experimental group, after the pretest, they're going to conduct class using the strategy introduced in this particular class. So later on, they're going to compare who was able to learn more. So again, this will fall under another element in our research paradigm. Okay, so after implementing the strategy during the lesson, it will now conduct a post-test to evaluate the learning of the class. So after this, your arrowhead will go down to the post-test. And then as you can see, after identifying the result of the post-test for both group, the controlled group and the experimental group, you are now going to identify if there is significant difference between the post-test of the two groups. And then the next one, under SOP number 7, what are the learning gains of the two groups individually or separately? What is the learning gain of the control group? So this is SOP number 7. Why SOP number 7? So we have not identified SOP number 6 yet. So SOP number 6, what is the significant difference between the pre-test and the post-test? So after identifying SOP number 5, significant difference of the post-test of the two groups, SOP number 6, you identify the significant difference between the pre-test and post-test of the two groups. So where will you find that significant difference of the pre-test and post-test? So I'm going to mark it here. This is the pre-test and post-test of the control group, and then the pre-test and the post-test of the experimental group. So this is already a significant difference of the pre-test and post-test. So again, this is the significant difference of pre-test and post-test for the experimental, and the other one is for the control group. So both of this will fall under SOP number 6. So this is SOP number 6. Okay? Now, after this, so after identifying SOP number 6, at the bottom, again, referring to our guide to the SOP number 7, what are the learning gains of the two groups? So this is where we put SOP number 7 and label SOP number 7 here. So these are the learning gains, what the class learned from their respective classes. So again, the learning gain for the control group should be identified. The learning gain for the experimental groups should also be individually identified. So we marked it as 7, referring to SOP number 7. Okay, next, SOP number 8. What is the significant difference between the learning gains of the two groups? So it's the same. After identifying the learning gains of the two groups, you now identify the significant difference between the control group and the experimental group. The significant difference between the learning gains of the two groups. So we mark this as SOP number 8, significant difference again. Okay. So I think we have already covered all of the SOP except for the remaining arrowheads. Okay, so this is where we complete the paradigm referring to or reflecting what is already presented in the statement of the problem. So this is already a representation of the paradigm. So this is what we meant by the relevance and relationship of the paradigm to the SOP. The SOP should directly present through diagram form the content and the flow of the statement of the problem, especially if you are conducting an experimental group, specifically quasi-experimental group. So the next part would be the formulation of the hypothesis. Again, these are a pre-made, templated form of SOP, research paradigm, and hypothesis. So I'm going to go through the different hypotheses that you can use for this particular type of research. So I'm just going to adjust the SOP upward so we can compare them together with the statement of the problem. So again, the hypothesis should also be directly related or relevant. These hypotheses should be directly relevant to the SOP that you have formulated. So based on the following hypothesis, if you observe, these hypotheses are how many do we have? I think this is only 4. So number 1 should not be included there. I'll just adjust this. Okay, so since that is just part of the introduction, this one, okay, so it is just saying that the hypothesis should be based on the SOP using standard deviation. So let's take that out. Okay, so there. So here, and let's just adjust the numbers. So under here, we have supposed to be SOP. This is supposed to be number 1. And then we have the second hypothesis, rather. This is hypothesis 2. And this is hypothesis 3. Okay, and this is hypothesis 4. So we have 4 of these hypotheses for this particular experimental research. And then let's just move this down so that we can compare this with the SOP that we have already formulated. So the hypothesis is based on the SOP, specifically referring to the using standard deviation. Okay, number 1. So in this particular hypothesis, hypotheses are formed in the null format. So null format, I have already explained this because most researchers expect a positive or affirmative result in their research. That is why we formulate usually the null hypothesis, specifically in our institution, to counteract the expected output of your research, which is in affirmative. So if you form your hypothesis in both affirmative and negative or null, the affirmative side would already agree with what is expected in the research. That is why in our particular institution, we formulate it in the null format. Okay, so now going to the hypothesis, there is no significant difference since it is in the null form. There is no significant difference between the pre-test and the post-test of the two groups. So since we compared this one, significant difference, the pre-test, we are referring to this one, SOP number 3. There is no significant difference between the pre-test. This is the pre-test of the two groups. So we've already addressed that first one. And then that's the next one, there is no significant difference between the post-test. These are the post-test, and we refer to the significant difference. We would like to know if there's significant difference in the post-test of the two groups. So that is also addressed in the second hypothesis. The third hypothesis, there is no significant difference between the pre-test and post-test of the two groups. So this is the pre-test and post-test under SOP 6, pre-test and post-test under the SOP 6. So we again have addressed that particular part. And then I think there's another one here. There is no significant difference between the learning gains of the two groups. These are the learning gains of the two groups, and we were looking for the significant differences. So again, we have addressed all of this in our hypothesis, and we have checked that all of this are reflected in our research paradigm. So again, this parts of your experimental research, specifically the paradigm, the SOP, and the hypothesis, can already be used in your respective experimental research design study. So all you need to do is just to properly label the elements, and then try to make it relevant to what you are conducting, and this will already be enough to substantiate the requirements for these particular parts of your research. So that's it, everyone. So I hope you were able to you will be able to use all of this in your research. So I'm going to zoom in on the individual parts so you can screenshot, and then these are the statement of the problem and the hypothesis for your experiment or experimental research. So again, everyone, thank you very much. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel at Docket Padama and click the notification bell to alert you when a new video has been uploaded. Again, on the side of your screen, you're going to see videos that would help you, suggested videos that would help you in writing your other parts of your research from chapters 1 to chapter 5. And on the other side will be my icon with my photo. If you click that, it will direct you to the subscription of my YouTube channel. So thank you very much, everyone. Stay safe and God bless. See you on our next video. Bye!